Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the announcement today that the threshold for winter fuel payments will increase to £35,000. So it looks like Labour are not taking any more chances with this turkey of a policy. They still get to deny it to wealthy pensioners, but have pretty much fully reversed it for almost everyone. So how exactly is this going to work, and will Labour be learning lessons for the future? But first, for daily news and politics, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So the way this is going to work is that everyone in receipt of the state pension is going to get the winter fuel allowance next winter, but those on incomes above £35,000 a year will have to pay it back with their tax returns. If anyone affected wants to avoid the hassle of doing that, they can choose to opt out of the winter fuel payments altogether just to make things easier. Now, the reason it's been done in this way is because trying to identify who should and who should not get it from the government end would cost a silly amount of money, and you know what, they'd still mess it up and get very damaging headlines. One of the arguments against the policy in the first place was that means testing often costs an excessive amount of money, and it's usually just not worth it, so that's why you make it universal. So the Treasury have dodged the problem by removing the complexity from their end. There is precedent for this sort of system. The same thing happens with child benefit. Now, child benefit is both universal and means tested in exactly the same way. Everyone gets it. Well, if you've got a child, everyone gets it. But if you earn above a certain amount, you have to pay some or all of it back with your taxes. Now, there are a couple of other benefits with the changes as well. First of all, if the household has, say, 2 state pensioners in it, the household payment is effectively split between them. That means if one of those pensioners is above the threshold and the other is below, the one below keeps their share. So even some households who could be on a very decent income will sometimes get some of the payment. You know, this is a proper no pensioner in trouble left behind type approach. Another improvement on the same lines is because it's means tested at the taxpayer end, not the government end. If someone is eligible for the payment but doesn't put themselves forward for it, they don't suffer. Under last year's system, there were known to be hundreds of thousands of pensioners eligible, but because they didn't apply for pension credit or one of the other qualifying benefits, because they didn't realise or for some other reason, they didn't get it, but they needed it and they were eligible. Well, now the default case is everyone gets it. So those people eligible but not applying don't suffer. It's a system which means that the positive action is needed to take it away, not to receive it. So that's how it's going to work. The question is, will this deal with the issue? Well, we will have to see what the public response is. I think it probably should deal with it. I think the Tory media will still gripe about it not being universal, but that might now fall into the same category as VAT on public school fees. It probably won't resonate with the public. A pensioner on £35,000 a year is on basically treble the state pension. That means that if about 2/3 at least of their income is from private or work pensions or other sources, that suggests their income will probably have been significantly above the average during their working life. I mean, £35,000 is, just to be clear, above the median income in the UK. So that is more than most workers get. So there was a really good chance that if they were earning significantly above the average during their working life, probably owned their own home. So most of them would not really need the extra couple £100. Nobody will be able to argue that anyone on £35,000 a year is a struggling pensioner, even though I expect the Telegraph to try. That being said, this is, in money terms, pretty much a full reversal. By doing it this way, Labour get to claim they haven't actually scrapped their policy. It is still means tested. They've just fine-tuned it. But if they could turn back time, you'd have to ask, would they have done this in the first place, just set the threshold at 35,000, or would they have just not bothered changing it at all? I would say they probably wouldn't have changed it at all because they're now saving almost nothing. In terms of where Labour go with this, it depends on whether they see it as an isolated issue or recognise that it was caused by a fundamental failure in their thinking, which needs to be addressed more widely. The good thing is that Labour didn't mess about trying to tweak this a little, because I was thinking, well, what are they going to do here? Like, are they going to raise it to £20,000, £25,000? I was thinking £30,000 would, like, that should sort it. You know, like £30,000, yep, draw a line under it. But actually, £35,000 takes the sting out of it almost completely. It is, as I say, in practical terms, a complete U-turn. In theory, come the election, people may even look back and go, well, you know, yeah, the government messed up, but they, you know, they listened and then they put it right. That can work. There is a worry for me that it just took too long to do so. But given that the election is still a few years away, not necessarily a disaster. However, they will still need to make sure they learn lessons. You know, this may have been a big focus on the doorstep, but it's not the only unpopular policy they have. You know, I am led to believe that the reason Labour thought they could go ahead with this policy, because it should have been stopped at Downing Street, if they didn't have absolute proof that the public would wear it, and they clearly didn't because the public didn't wear it, they should have, this is a sort of thing that should have been blocked by 10 Downing Street, right? The reason apparently they thought they could go ahead with it was a combination of two lines of thinking. First, they thought the public had priced in that things would get worse before they got better. Now, I could show them detailed polling from just after the election, which was publicly available, which would give the opposite view. Second, that they thought that because the Tories were secretly in favour, they wouldn't make a fuss. Again, it's like they just don't know how party politics works. Now, unless they candidly, behind closed doors, they don't have to do it publicly, but unless they, amongst each other, candidly acknowledge how they got this badly wrong, instead of just saying, right, we got it wrong, let's put it right. No, they need to go back and go, so how did we go wrong? If they don't do that, they will continue to trip themselves up because they will learn no lessons. They cannot think of it as an isolated cock-up, which has now been rectified, but a fundamental failure to understand both the public and their political opponents. It's not like this U-turn, bear in mind, gives Labour any bonus points in the polls. It just represents restoring something that people felt shouldn't have been taken away in the first place, and absolutely none of their opponents approved of the policy anyway. So all Labour are doing now is bringing themselves back in line with literally every political party. So Labour don't attract votes by putting it back as such, they just reduce the level of push for voters to turn elsewhere. In order to really get voters back, they're going to have to emphasise the actual benefits of them being in government. You know, they're going to try to emphasise the big boost to NHS spending with the spending review. That's the big showpiece announcement. Yes, we're being a bit tight here and here, but the NHS is getting loads of money. But they tried to lean into the improvements to the NHS waiting times over winter. I mean, I thought that was a really powerful message. Like, how do you make the NHS better over winter? But they didn't really get that message through to very many people. So as well as making sure that they pay more careful attention to key voters, something they seem to have abandoned since taking office, and understanding how their opponents are going to react. And they're not going to go, oh yes, we'd have done that anyway. We wanted to do that. Yeah. No, they're going to attack you for anything. I would suggest a third lesson. They need to understand how public messaging works. Now, I talk enough about how Labour should develop their own lines of communication beyond activists on the doorstep who are, like, you know, quite a few of them are disenchanted with the more socially regressive moves, but they need other lines as well. And if they continue to refuse to do so, they at least need to understand how the existing messaging ecosystem works. Like, they need to understand if the government announced two policies and one of them is popular and one is unpopular, well, guess which one the media will report on? So if they insist on being passive in terms of media engagement, which I don't care what they think, that's what they're doing right now, they at least need to choke off the supply of unpopular announcements. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even become a member for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.